Welcome to Real Judaism with Rabbi Ari Klapper. Unfiltered wisdom for Jewish life.
Okay, Be'ez Hashem, we'll be starting now here. Chelik Beis, Perek Dalid. This Perek is titled Emunah. It's the Perek here is a little bit of a side point. We've discussed at great length in the first three prakim, Yesod HaChiddush, specifically in the first Perek of Chelik Beis, Yesod HaChiddush. Now, the first half of Perek Dalid, he's going to be talking about the Yesodis of Emunah. And the second half, he'll be talking about how does this relate to Shabbos. Yet it's still in Chelik Beis, which is the basis of Chelik Beis, is the Yesod HaChiddush, Chiddush HaOlam, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, Yesh Ma'ayin. So it is very much connected to that idea that we've been bringing out in the last number of Shurim. But here, he talks about really taking some of the Yesodis that we've been doing and really trying to make him part of ourselves. And we'll see as we move along, the ideas behind Emunah, a lot of times we're confused and we think, well, do I have Emunah? Do I not have Emunah? Do I have Bitachon? Do I not? Do I have it or do I not have it? Right? A person has doubts in these things, or I don't feel it, right? How come I don't feel it? So I think there are going to be a lot of these questions that are going to be answered in this Perek that we're going to be talking about now. So let's begin. We're on page Samech, right here in the beginning of Perek Daled, Chelik Beis. Echad hakinuyim hamuskarim b'sifrei hakadmonim lemidas hamalchus hu ha'emunah. One of the names that we use for the midah of Malchus, which was what we've been talking a lot about, certainly the Chelik Aleph, but we've already mentioned it in Chelik Beis, is Emunah. Emunah is one of the names for Malchus. What is that? Hadavar muvan shaharei gilui Hashem yisbarach ba'olamenu hu rag derech midas ha'emunah. The revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world is only through the midah of Emunah. Shesof sof mish mistakel be'inyonim tiviot ala oilam umalo eno roya es haboirei. Somebody who looks at the world, just at the regular nature of the world, won't necessarily see Hashem. Even though the Rambam says all you have to do to see Hashem is look into the Bria. Just look into the Bria and you'll see the amazing world that Hashem created. It's quite remarkable. If you think about it for a second, the living creatures, even the non-living creatures, but certainly the living creatures on this planet are so complex. They have to work in such symmetry that how could a person possibly imagine that it was just like a bunch of things bumping into each other in order for this to happen? It's quite amazing. You think about it, even a fruit, this is a big thing where Victor Miller Zatzal used to talk about all the time, the amazingness of the world around us, the complexity of the human eye, and how the human eye is the most advanced camera you can imagine, and how it's so packaged, so small, and in such a nice way, a pleasing way. In different colors, right? People have different color eyes, and yet, and the fruit that there are out there. How come HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave different colors to every fruit to make it appealing for a person to want to eat them, and how the color changes to tell you that it's ready? All of these things are so complex, but yet most of the world doesn't look at it like that. They look at when you look just at the nature of the world, and you say that's just the world runs. The world runs. It just happens. Every once in a while there's a natural disaster, right? There's a phenomenal occurrence in nature which is out of the ordinary. No, but that also is included into the laws of nature, right? There are tornadoes and hurricanes in the world. That's also part of nature. People don't see it as Hashem running the world. Just as an interesting story I heard years ago, where it's good for a company or for anybody to acknowledge God, that's when they'll acknowledge God. So I heard a story about somebody who was struck by lightning, and at the time he was listening to something, an MP3. I don't know if it was an MP3 back then or it was, Walkman or whatever it was back at that time, right? And he had what they called earpods, but they weren't called back then. They weren't called earbuds back then. They were called earphones, right? So he had them in his ears. And when he was struck by lightning, his eardrums blew out. And it also destroyed his entire machine, whatever it was. And so he's in the hospital, right? Obviously. He gets struck by lightning. You're not going to. But he sent a letter to this company saying that he was struck by lightning and he would like a replacement of the machine, the device that he was using. He would like them to replace it. So they sent a letter back saying, even though generally we don't cover acts of God, we're going to replace it anyway. Oh, they call it an act of God, right? Person gets struck by lightning, that could also be pushed aside and say, oh, just nature. That was nature. No, a person gets struck by a boom. So sometimes people will acknowledge, sometimes they won't. Even the Chovos Levovos says that there is a low level of bitachon where a person will acknowledge God when there is no other explanation whatsoever. When there is no other way to say, to put yourself out there and say, oh, I have a reason for this happens, why that happens, or whatever. So then even people will acknowledge God. And they tell a story of an atheist who was in a very, very dangerous situation, and he started praying, and there was somebody else there with him. And after they got out of the situation, he said to him, you hypocrite, will you call yourself an atheist? I saw you. You're praying just like anybody else. So what did he say? He said back, if you tell anybody that I was praying, I'm going to kill you. Okay, so people can acknowledge or not acknowledge and, live a lie, whatever they want. It's very easy to go through this world and not acknowledge Hashem. The world just runs. Sorry. You're going to see Hashem. I'm in the first paragraph on Daf Samach. Only if you have eyes of Emunah, that's when you can see Hashem. It must be then that Emunah is what is Megale, the Malchus of Hashem in the world. That is the Midah Malchus. You know how we see the Melech? Through the eyes of Emunah. So what is Emunah? What does that mean? What does Emunah mean? So we just said before, Malchus and Emunah is a name for Malchus. So we said previously that Malchus doesn't have of itself really anything. It takes from everything else. So it's the same thing with Emunah. Emunah doesn't have anything of itself. No como ava v'yira shahalev mitalehet imrikshe ava v'roy miyira. It's not an emotion. Emunah is not an emotion. I think people get stuck on this sometimes. They think, I don't have Emunah because I don't feel it. Emunah is not an emotion, says Rapinkus. It's not a feeling of love or a feeling of fear that a person will actually feel. It's not that. Ilu Emunah ein la shum hergish. There is no feeling that comes with Emunah. Rak re'iyas amitis hametzius kemo she'i beli lahoisif alei klum. Emunah is seeing things as they really are. Seeing. Acknowledging. It doesn't have to come with an emotion. It can be very, very technical, but seeing for what it really is. That is Emunah. Moshel, somebody sees something in front of him. What does he see? He sees this thing. We see, we're using our koyach of sight in order to see. There's something here. That's what Emunah is. I see there's something here. I see that there's something godly over here. It doesn't have any other parameters. Just acknowledging what is really here. So therefore, with this understanding, really Emunah is the source of all life. What does that mean? Emunah is the source for all the other good midos. If a person doesn't have Emunah, so then he's totally in the dark. Again, Emunah means seeing things for what they are. If a person doesn't see God and all the amazing things that are happening in the world, So then, why should I do anything? Why should I work on my midos, right? If you think about it, where in the world today is there a place where people are actively working on their midos? Is there a university somewhere that I don't know about where the goal of this university is to produce people with high character, to produce good people, to produce quality people? Is there such a place in the world? Where? Marriage council? I don't know. What is that? They try. There are places where they learn anger management, because anger management is something that's necessary for a person to be able to live like a normal life. But to have good midos, only in yeshivas. Or even try, all yeshivas, Be'ez Hashem, I hope it's that way. But it's not considered to be a trait of the secular world. It's not considered to be like a maila. Wow, what a great thing. This university produces people of high quality. No, there's no such thing like that. Only in the Torah world. Only in the Torah world is there such a thing. Teaching Emunah? Where do they teach Emunah? There's any university, any ashram somewhere where they're teaching you to believe in God? Maybe in some of these, I don't know. Yeah, maybe you just gotta believe, but like from an intellectual level, again, belief, Emunah, the Reb Pinkus is saying, is intellectual. It's seeing, it's understanding what there is in front of you. That's what it is. It's not just blind faith where, I don't see anything, but I believe anyway. No. It doesn't work like that. Look what you're looking at. One of my Rebbeim, Allah Shalom, or Moshe Avrik, Zatzal, he wrote a book on atheism. Very interesting, very good book. It's, I forgot the name of the book right now. I think it's called, It's called something about a whole load of nonsense, or nonsense of a high order, or something like that. And he, in the book, he gives a very interesting mashal. He says, imagine for a second, a person is lost at sea, and they're on a desert island, and they search the entire island, and there is absolutely nobody else on the island. There's nobody else there. They went up and down the whole island. They looked everywhere. There's nobody else on the island. One day they wake up, and they see written on the beach. This man's name is Joe. He sees written on the beach. It says, "Good morning, Joe," in the sand. Somebody wrote it in the sand, "Good morning, Joe." It says, what are the chances that the night before the wind came and made this "Good morning, Joe"? What are the chances of that happening? Well, you'd have to be a complete lunatic to assume such a thing. Yeah, it was the wind. It was a fish that jumped out of the ocean and made this, You would have to be absolutely mad in order. Obviously, there was somebody here who did this. So all you have to do is open your eyes and no, it was the wind that did it. It was a bunch of monkeys bumping into each other that they did it. It was, aliens landed and they did it. Somebody wrote this. It didn't happen by accident. We have to just open our eyes and see what's in front of us. That is what Emunah is. And that is the source of everything else. Because once we have Emunah, once we know Hashem created the world, everything over here, there's nothing here by accident. Well, then I can build off of that and say, well, it must be that Hashem, He created the world. He created the world for a reason. It must be that He wants us to do something. It must be. So then we can build off and we can talk about other things as well. So the Emunah is the source, but it doesn't have anything of itself. All it is just very intellectual. Just understanding what's there in front of you. Look at the world. See what's there. Starting now, Oz Beis. Mahu hamakor v'hasiba le'emunah ha'chochma. The source of Emunah is chochma. Using our minds to see what's really there. Soif. Adam mitiv'o eino mamin ve'eino mekabel davar she'eino masig v'yodea b'seichel she'amnan emesu. A person will not accept something unless his mind allows him to accept it. There must be some reason for that. Why did this happen? A lot of people just want to just go through life and just have fun and not think about things, because belief in something has to have a basis to it. So I'd rather not believe in anything and just do whatever I want. Versus, no, if I really understand how things are done properly, if I really understand, so then I I can really build off of that and make my life more meaningful. Nimsha she'achokma hi siba le'emunah. Chokhmah is the way that I get to emunah. Amnam ha'chokhmah eino ha'emunah atzma. Chokhmah is not emunah. Shavilu kishemasik besichlo davar lamito shu v'nimsa. Because even if you recognize something for what it is right in front of you, yesh koyach ba'adam lastiro michushav la'ashir also begeder mushlochos b'li hergesh ha'mechayev et kochos ha'ov v'lira. Because even if you see something right in front of you, to bring it lamaise is something that's completely different. There are many, many people like that story I just told about that atheist, that they will, in front of their eyes, you can see that they understand one thing, but they'll reject it outright, even though it's a hypocritical, because I'm not ready to live like that. I'm not ready to accept that. I'm not ready to take that knowledge and take it to the next level of, hey, I have the knowledge. Let me act on that. Let me make that be part of me. Day midos hang. There are two parts here. Hashoyreshu midos hachochma. The first is using your mind, understanding what is there. Ladas is emes. What is really there? Emunah. And then afterwards is emunah lahashiv is emes alev velachushim. Then to bring that emes into ourselves, into our hearts. To look at emes as I'm living. I want to live this emes. I'm going to live my whole life sheker. Right? As a person walking out in the middle of the winter, and I didn't want to wear a coat. Yeah, but it's snowing and it's freezing, and you're not gonna get very far without freezing over. Put on a coat. No, I refuse to accept the situation as it is. I'm going to live in my dream world and pretend I'm at the beach, right? That's obviously a ridiculous thing to say, but that essentially is the way people want to live. I don't care what the MS is. I want to live the way that I want to live, which is why first the recognition of what is MS and then taking it in. Very interesting that they say, I heard about Rav Uri Zohar, Allah Shalom, Zechatzaddik Levrocha, was one of the most famous Balei Tshuva of the last century, and he became a Baal Tshuva when he was already middle-aged. And they say that his thought process, which is a tremendous godless, but he said that just because he came to the recognition that he was living a false life, that he wasn't living with the MS, and he recognized that. That's still a big step, like we said, to get to the next part, to live that way. But he said about himself, just because I lived a lie for the first 45 years of my life, doesn't mean I should live a lie for the next 45 years of my life. Now that's a big, big thing, because that involves totally changing your life. Taking that MS, or what you see, and actually doing something about it, putting it into your heart. That I want to live this way. I understand, I see in front of me what's happening in the world, just the basics of the creation of the world, or all the hashgacha pratis in the world, whether it's hashgacha pratis that we like, or it's hashgacha pratis that we don't like. But we see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world in such an amazing way. Just open our eyes and see, wow, what's going on over here? What's happening over here? And that's when a person can take it to his heart and say, okay, now I want to make this part of me. So how does a person do that? So that's here in Ois Gimel and Daled, talks about the steps to bring on Emunah. The first step is to really just stop and think. Think about what's happening in the world. Think about the most basic things. The most basic things in the world. It could be anything. It could be a tree. You look at a tree, you see, wow, fruit from this tree. How does that happen? You think about a human being. All you have to do is walk into a hospital and see all the things that can go wrong with a person's body. Then your person will appreciate that his body works. There are so many different things that can go wrong. So many. And the hospitals are full of people where you wouldn't even imagine the different things that people are going through. All different types of illnesses. Just think about, wow, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me a body and it works. We appreciate that. The appreciation is the second part. First, understanding look how my body works. This was, like we said, a big thing that Rav Victor Miller pushed a lot. Recognizing Hashem in everything that's happening in the world. So we said that the first part is think about the intricacies of Hashem in this world. The second is to think about the Messiah of our Torah. Think about the immortality of the Jewish people. It's quite amazing. The same Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down from HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Har Sinai is the same Torah that we have today, thousands of years later. It's quite amazing. Right? Rav Leib Kellerman has a couple of svarim, permission to believe and permission to receive. And the svarim are about believing in Hashem and believing in Torah Misinai. And if you just stop and think from a very intellectual place in permission to believe, he gives a number of arguments for belief in God. And one of the arguments is the immortality of the Jewish people, that we're still around. And not only that, 2,000 years after being exiled, somehow we're back here in Eretz Yisrael. Jewish people are back in Eretz Yisrael 2,000 years after being exiled. It's amazing. It's really, how do you explain this? Go to any ancient society, any ancient community. Where are they? They're gone. The Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians. These empires have all disappeared. Yes, there are people that live in Greece, and there are people who live in Iraq and Iran, but these are not the same people. They're not the same. These are not the Babylonians, the ancient Babylonians. They're not in Egypt. It's not the ancient Egyptians. In Rome, it's not the ancient Romans. These are different people that are there. Think about it. How are the Jewish people still here? So a person stops. Wait a second. We have a Messiah. We have a Torah. And the Torah has kept us alive. The more our Emunah is ingrained into us, the more we can see Hashem, and the more we can be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what he says over here at the end of Oz Gimel about our Mesiras Nefesh v'Torah. Anu makirin avoseinu v'raboseinu afilu b'dor shefel zeh. We recognize our own fathers and our Rabbanim in this generation. V'lo raket avoseinu ela gam et atzmeinu. We see in ourselves shmuchanim anu lizbol 1,000 mitos bilvad shelo tishtana ois achas min haTorah u'mi'amesorah shenimtzur misinai. Baruch Hashem, there's still people who care about the Torah, and the people are being Moshe Nefesh for the Torah, and they won't bend. They'll be Moshe Nefesh in order to keep the Torah. V'aseichel mevin shemesoyes sha'avra b'tzura kazu midor ledor mufkahim miziu ve'emes hilad. A power like this shows you that this is not a forgery, and it's something that lasts forever. You look at the other major religions in the world, you'll see that it didn't take so long for them to start to splinter off. Unfortunately, in Judaism today, there are people who claim to be their own sects of Judaism. But those people have left the Torah. And if they've left the Torah, we see what happens to them. Those groups are decimated. They are ceasing to be around at all. The Reform, conservative, and the like are just dying out. What they make up for people, they have in money. But people, they don't have. It's getting fewer and fewer and fewer as the generations go by. Even the founders of these movements, they themselves didn't have Jewish descendants. The only people who are still around, who are strong and are still thriving, are the ones who are connected to the Torah. So we see that's an amazing thing. When you recognize that, you see the immortality of the Torah. It must be that this is true. Because if it was a forgery, it would just splinter off into nothing. In Islam, already in the second generation, it splits. By the second generation, Islam splits. Because there was a fight between their great leader, between his son and his son-in-law. Who should take over the reins after their, what the Rambam calls their Meshugana. After he died, who took over? So that's why there are two groups. There's the Shiites and the Sunni. That started immediately after his death. And Christianity as well has so many different groups. It's amazing. I don't even know how many there are. You can just list a whole bunch off the top of my head, but that's just from a layman. And which one is the right one? Which one is yeah? How do you know? They're still around. Many of them have been around for hundreds of years. How do you know which one? No. Every time there's something else new, you have a new fangled thing, a new cult, a new this, a new that. Why? Somebody told me these new things, Scientology. I don't even know what these things are. New religions popping up because people are searching for anything, and they'll grab onto whatever garbage they're given, as long as there's some kind of candy that comes along with it. The fact that something has been around for so long and people are still clinging to it shows how it's emes. That's all a person has to do. A person has to look to see what is emes. How is things around for so long? In Os Dali, he takes it to the next level, which is bitachon. Bitachon is becoming now, we're taking that emunah and we're living it. We first were saying, I recognize this is true. Then there's a desire to actually be connected to it. I want to live this. First, I recognize it. Intellectual, purely understanding what's out there, what Hashem does in the world. The next step, I want to be part of that. I want to accept that into my life. And the third part is now I want to start to live it. And starting to live that is called bitachon. And everybody has to work on their bitachon. It's tests that we get all the time. People could be getting these tests every single day. How do I act? How do I react? And we test ourselves to see, if I really had bitachon, I would have acted differently. So I'm going to try harder next time to do the right thing. And that'll build up my bitachon. I'd like to now take this now to finish up for today. What does this have to do with Shabbos? How is this connected to Shabbos? And this is something that I mentioned last week. And here he says it in Ois Beis. Iker ha-mitzvah ha-miyuchedet l'Shabbos hi Emunah. The main mitzvah that is connected to Shabbos is Emunah. V'hainu zochor es Yom HaShabbos. Remember Shabbos. What are we supposed to remember on Shabbos? L'skor v'lasim lev el metzius ha-Shabbos ve'el ma shehi melamedet otanu. Pay attention. Think about, what does Shabbos teach us? We learned all about what Shabbos teaches us. Ha-Shabbos atma lesli megarma klum. Shabbos itself doesn't have anything. Ein lag toichen o mitzvah avoida. It doesn't have a specific mitzvah to do. There's no adlo yoda on Shabbos. There's no lulav on Shabbos. No special mitzvah on Shabbos. Rak shederech haShabbos roim et Hashem yisbarach v'yichudo. Our job on Shabbos is to recognize Hashem. Like we discussed in the first chelek, what's happening on Shabbos is that the Shekhinah is coming in. Hashem is telling us, I created the world. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to look at Shabbos and think about Emunah. Think about all the things that Hashem does for us. Think about all the things that Hashem does for the world. Shabbos hi aspaklaria le'emunah ba'amitas chidush ha'olam. Shabbos is the window which we can build up our Emunah of understanding that there's a yesh me'ayin, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world from nothing. Im kol hamashmos hanor hayotzim menu, like we learned before. That is our main job on Shabbos. What are we supposed to be doing to build up our Shabbos? Think about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Think about what an amazing world HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. Build up our Emunah. That's what we're supposed to be doing on Shabbos. Actively strengthening a person's Emunah is the avodah. Think about these things. Try to do it when I'm walking to shul on Friday nights. After I leave the house, I'm a kabbalah on myself. Kedusha Shabbos, and think about, Hashem is here. And Hashem is here, so Hashem is showing us that creation came to an end. Creation came to an end. It means there was a creation in the beginning. It means there was a time that there was no creation. Because if creation has an end, it means it had a beginning. If it had a beginning, that means there was something before that. It means it had to come from somewhere. It means Hashem created the world, yesh me'ayin, and Hashem is everything and the only thing. And the more we think about that, the more we're using Shabbos for its exact purpose, and that is to build up our Emunah in Hashem. And in Ois Beis over here, he adds another nekuda, which will probably come up again later on in the Sefer, but a very important nekuda. We can actively add to that by acknowledging that when we don't work on Shabbos, we're showing that I don't have to work on Shabbos, because everything comes from Hashem anyway. If a person didn't believe in Hashem, well, every day I don't work, I'm not making money, right? Like all those people who work on Shabbos, And they say, what do you mean? If I wouldn't work on Shabbos, I wouldn't make the money. I have to work on Shabbos. I wouldn't make the money otherwise. By us not working on Shabbos, we're saying, oh no, it's from Hashem anyway. We're stopping ourselves actively and saying, Parnas is from Hashem. I don't need to work on Shabbos. It's going to come from Hashem anyway. This was a much bigger thing during the time when that was a real nisayon, like in the times in the early 1900s in America, where this was a massive nisayon to say such a thing and to do such a thing. They really felt it. When you didn't work on Shabbos and you came to work on Monday and there was no job and you still said, doesn't matter, I'm not gonna do it anyway. So that showed real emunah in Hashem. But essentially it's the same idea, even if it's easier for us. For sure it's easier for us. But that's why we have to put in more effort to be mechazik the idea. Why am I not working? I'm not working because Hashem said not to work, and I trust Hashem. I know that Hashem is going to give me parnasa, and I know Hashem is going to take care of me. And that's why he ends off over here at the end of Oz Beis. He says over here that when we see everything from Hashem, then we're living with Hashem. It's like we're in Olam Haba. It's like we're living with Hashem completely. So when a person is eating, sitting in his Suda Shabbos, he's sitting there and enjoying Suda Shabbos, is like he's sitting with the king. Mamash, like he's sitting with the king. I don't lack anything. What am I worried about? So again, the Iker Avoida, as he brings out in this section over here, the Iker Avoida on Shabbos is to be mechazik our emunah. And we should try to do that actively, set aside time at least, to think about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and how he runs the world and how he's taking care of me and he's everything and I don't have to worry. The more a person does that, more he's being mechazik, his emunah on Shabbos, the more he'll appreciate Shabbos and the more he'll see the Shechina in Shabbos. Hashem, we should all be zayvah. Goya.
Thank you for joining Real Judaism, where we explore Torah's wisdom for real life. Created by J Foundations and produced by Eli Podcast Productions. Find more episodes at realjudaism.org and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.